Fritz the Cat is a character created by Robert Crumb, which he first started drawing in his childhood and eventually started to put into his underground comics when he started doing those. Fritz was usually seen as somewhat of a reflection of Crumb himself, and as Crumb went through changes of personality throughout his life, so did Fritz. The movie Fritz the Cat is infamous for two reasons. The first is that it was the first ever theatrically released animated movie that was rated X. And I don't mean rated X like in some vague sense of the content. X actually used to mean something. It was an actual rating from the MPAA, which was more severe than R. But the MPAA forgot to trademark the X rating. So X-rated became a catch-all marketing term used by porn distributors, so they changed the X to NC-17, which they then trademarked. But it's pretty much the same thing. It's not often that movies make it to the theater with an X or an NC-17 rating. Usually they get edited and resubmitted until they can get an R. But in this case, the film celebrates its rating right down to the movie's poster. As you can see in the image in this very video, it boasts about being X-rated twice. The other reason that Fritz the Cat is infamous is because Robert Crumb himself hated the movie so much that it made him hate the character, and he killed Fritz off for good in the comics not too long after. The reasons that Crumb hated the movie are guessed at and theorized, but all Crumb has said on the subject is that the movie depressed him and he killed the character off shortly after seeing the film, though they did make a sequel to which Crumb simply said, "You can't win." The movie itself is based on several Fritz comics, but it doesn't really tell a cohesive story due to the fact that it's cobbled together from so many strips. Fritz the Cat himself, as a character, is this sort of manic college student type who is looking to experience as much sex and drugs as he can. For the most part, he's just out for a good time, but then he gets a vague sense of indignation throughout and wants to start a revolution against all the vague notions that he feels are troubling him, and he gets caught up with some anarchists who want to blow up a power plant. But while Fritz is doing it just to impress some women and become the counter-revolutionary, dangerous type that he feels would be impressive, he chastises the anarchists for not believing in their own causes and only doing pseudo-psychobabble as an excuse for violence. But he never seems to realize his own hypocrisy, as usually he just slips into whatever persona he thinks will impress people. One issue that you can bring up with this film is its way of handling race. The movie is easy to call racist, as though it's populated by dozens of different types of anthropomorphic animals. The black characters are all depicted as jive-talking crows. Though before really getting to that section in the movie, in which is this the most apparent, including a large black female crow that Fritz attempts to seduce, mocking his endowment, saying he's not black enough, the movie subverts the racist trope in the beginning by having three ditzy girls all try to impress a crow by talking about how much they identify with the black struggle of the 60s, and he dismisses them after putting up with it for a few minutes, walking away and making them look like idiots. Crumb himself was sometimes accused of racism, as he drew blacks in a very stereotypical way in his comics, though that could be seen less as actual racism and more as a deconstruction of it. Though he didn't always cover politics, the style of Crumb's comics were that of political cartoons, using exaggerated cliches and similes to get a point across visually. Fritz the Cat is a mess of a movie, and is mostly a delivery system for debauched cartoon animal sex. I can see a certain disgusting subculture of the internet liking it for that at least, but it does have its moments, mostly when it plays with exaggerations in depiction. Ralph Bakshi's animation style already had that underground comics feel to it, so it works well with Crumb's words. It's just that Fritz never really should have been a movie to begin with. He's both too shallow to do a full-length movie about, and at the same time he's too complex of a character to do justice for. He's as much of a contradiction as R. Crumb himself. That being said, for animation fans and fans of underground comics, there are some thrills to be had. It just comes off as way more Ralph Bakshi than Robert Crumb, which is fine, but I would recommend Ralph Bakshi's other works before this. I'm going to give this one a 5 out of 10.